have the greatest job in the world, and that's working with dogs.
Best in Show winner is the French Bulldog.
Winston won the National Dog Show. It was amazing. It was exciting. And to have a dog to be #1 dog in this country, you have to have great nutrition. And I always fed Pro Plan. Just like us, when we eat well, we feel good. And I just love that food and what it's done all these years to all the dogs I've bred and all the dogs I've shown.
Welcome to Pure Dog Talk. I am your host, Laura Reeves, and we have one of my favorite people in dogs today. We are going to talk about Chihuahuas, a wonderful little breed, and my friend Kristi Green is here to visit with us about them. And I've interviewed Kristi a couple times, mostly for the blog and for the old Best in Show Daily. I did the top 30 under 30, and Kristi was one of the people I talked to. So I really have just watched her trajectory in Chihuahuas with awe because it is so impressive. So welcome, Kristi. Super excited to have you here today. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm all right. Give us a little bit of the 411, man. Tell us a little bit how you wound up in Chi-Chi land.
So I kind of came into it sort of backwards. I had bought a little pet, and she, I adored her, but she kind of had everything wrong with her that you could possibly imagine. But I was so in love with her. I was like, what if we had this, but better? I was like, what if we could have this where it's not so terrified of strangers that it dives underneath my brake pedal when somebody else gets in the car? That was the thing that happened. But so she kind of was my inspiration for like, let me find out how I can get a better one. And then as I sort of looked into it, there was really sort of a gap in what was available as far as Chihuahuas went. There wasn't really a whole lot of health testing going on in the breed at the time. There wasn't, there was a couple very prominent breeders that bred a fair bit, but you couldn't find a lot of information. There wasn't a lot of transparency in the breed. So, I'm like, okay, how do I do this? How do I go about making a better version of this? Because I love this and I want more of this. Right. And so I kind of started researching it. I was like, well, I should probably get something and show it first, and learn about what they're supposed to physically look like. I started looking for a show dog, and I had a lot of people say to me, well, that's nice you want that, but you're kind of young and you're not going to be around for long. So pretty much no. Was more or less actually one of the people that I asked if I could be on their waiting list. And she told me literally point blank, no. We ended up working together quite a bit over the last, years. It's funny. And I kind of will remind her, remember when you told me no? But so finding that first dog, I ended up getting my first couple dogs really from pet breeders that were nice enough to kind of let me take a chance. And I finished the first one. He was actually my first group winner. A little dog named Sylvan Creek Not for Kids. He didn't pass all of his health tests. I ended up not breeding him. And then I had bought a tiny little bitch from a breeder that was like, well, she's really cute, but she's probably too small to breed. And that was my foundation bitch. And she led to, she's behind all three of my Best in Show and multi-Best in Show winners. She's behind one of my national specialty winners. She's behind quite a few Best in Specialty winners. She's really back there in nice. Almost all of my pedigrees. And nice. So yeah, that was kind of the way that I ended up into it. And then I found out that I actually really enjoyed showing. I liked the experience of doing it with my dogs, kind of the quality time that you're more or less forced to spend with them, training them for the ring, because Chihuahuas are not necessarily the easiest. And just over the years, it sort of morphed into really trying to breed for health, temperament, and type, in every dog that I produce.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And so talk to us about just living with a Chihuahua. They're little, there's lots of people love them, and there's also lots of not very good ones. So both in temperament and health and type. So yeah. So talk to us about, for the average owner that's going to live with a Chihuahua, you have this 5-pound dog in your house that may or may not be charming with strangers, right? So how do you talk to us about that?
For sure. So, I think that the biggest part about living with a Chihuahua is that they can be as good of a dog as you want them to be, or as bad of a dog as you let them be. There's a
So
lot
on
of
point.
there's a lot of user error, and really successful users, for lack of a better word.
Right.
I hear people say that their Chihuahua tried to bite somebody, and I think, like, mine don't do that. And I've got a lot of Chihuahuas. I've had a lot of Chihuahuas, come and go
Right.
throughout my house, and how you handle them in certain situations really, really has a lot to do with the dog that you have. Kind of what you put in is what you get out. But just day-to-day life with them, I mean, they're wonderful dogs. You've got this little dog that thinks you hung the moon and the stars, whether you barely got out of bed that day, or, you solved world peace.
Right.
They love you no matter what. And that really is part of their charm, is just how much they love you.
And they're very portable. I mean, you can take them anywhere, which is one of my favorite, like, pick up and carry. I like this. This is good. Um,
Yeah.
do you see particular personality? I showed a couple of them, so I'm curious your thoughts. Personality differences between the long coat and the smooth coat.
On the one hand, I'd like to say that there really shouldn't be. Um, I only breed smooths now, but I would say, as a general rule, I feel like the long coats do tend to be maybe a little bit sweeter.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that is, because they're in the same litter. That really
Right.
shouldn't be, but I do feel like they tend to be a little bit sweeter, maybe a tad more easygoing, where the smooths, you tend to have a little bit more of, like, that feistiness and that loyalty. And those differences shouldn't be there, but I think I'd be lying if I said I didn't see them.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't spend nearly the amount of time in years or numbers, but that's what I saw. So.
It's, I mean, it really is definitely a thing, and
Mm.
it same litter. How could that be?
Right.
But it is.
Right. Right. So, okay. And I think, again, because we see in Chihuahuas, they're small, they're out there in the world. A lot of people think they have a Chihuahua. It's really not, right? So, for the average person who wants to acquire a at least a good, or a better than average, like a fair representative of the breed, how are they going to do that? I mean, you talked a little bit about the difficulties you had just getting one, and they have 2 puppies in a litter. Like, it's hard to
Yeah, and
get a Chihuahua. So help people, give them some really good, actionable tips about how they can track down at least a decent Chihuahua to live with them as their pet.
yeah. So I think that, obviously, getting to know your breeder, it helps if they have a website, but not every breeder is going to have a website. Unfortunately, a lot of our population in Chihuahuas is aging.
Hmm.
So if you have a breeder that you're interested in, and they don't really have a web presence, it's important to pick up the phone and talk to them.
Okay.
See pictures, if you can, of how the dogs are raised, where the dogs are lived. It really kind of has become the gold standard in Chihuahuas now that you do health test the dogs. That really has changed over the last 15 years since I started. And I think
Right.
that that's important. And look for a breeder that's not just, oh, my dogs are healthy, they've been health tested, but that they're putting those dogs in the database, because it says they care about the big picture.
Right.
Not just selling puppies, but they care about what happens in 15 years when somebody wants to learn about a pedigree. They can go find that. So breeders that are participating in health testing, and then, a Chihuahua that's going to be a good pet really has been home raised. They've been raised in your house, they've been raised underfoot. They've been exposed to just life in a house. They, also have been socialized. I think, it's a good idea to ask the question of, what do you do to socialize the puppies? How are the puppies potty trained? Are you doing anything as far as those things go? Because that early framework really does make a big difference as far as how the dog handles life for the next 15 years.
Hmm. And that's
So
the
yeah,
other thing. They live forever. Like you really want to start with
yeah.
a good one.
And additionally to that, a breeder that shows, it really does show that they care that the dogs conform to the standard. Gidget, the Taco Bell Chihuahua, she was a Chihuahua, but not a very good one. You can have a Chihuahua that doesn't conform to the standard that would never finish in the show ring. So dogs finishing in the show ring, becoming champions, it does show that on some level, that animal at least relatively looked like it should, and
Right.
so if you're going to buy a dog, if you're going to invest money into purchasing a dog, make sure that there's been value put into it. You've got health tested parents that conformationally have been shown and look like the breed should, and then just that the temperaments on the puppies are affable, and that the breeder has done something to sort of nurture that while they've been with the breeder.
That is so on point, and I think it's true for most breeds, but I think it's really, really as necessary or more necessary than ever with a dog that weighs 5 pounds,
Yeah,
right?
for
That
sure.
is just so fragile. And if the health isn't there, you're going to spend a lot of money at the vet because
I mean, that was my first little Chihuahua. It was like, just there were the health issues, and there were the temperament issues, and you know, people say, oh, well, it doesn't really matter if the dog moves well. Well, she moved horribly, and she broke down a whole lot sooner. Her body wasn't designed in a way that could just handle day-to-day life. And that was really hard. That was one of the reasons that it really did become important to me to breed for structure and movement.
Yeah.
Because a dog that's comfortable is a better companion.
Yes.
So, I think that, again, showing kind of filters out some of those really bad ones too, where hopefully you're getting a puppy that's maybe built how it should, and then it's going to be comfortable for its life.
Right. Which is important. Even for toy dogs, they still have to get to the food bowl, man.
Ideally they do more than that, but.
And tell us a little bit, it's really a fascinating history, the history of the breed, like how they developed in Mexico and all of those things. Can you give us like a little backgrounder? Because I think it's kind of cool.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I actually think that it's one of those things that you'll hear different stories about where they came from or what their origin is. So we actually, I will say, don't truly know for sure their origin, but we suspect that they probably originated in Mexico, and they were, you hear on one hand that they were little street dogs, they were little desert dogs, and they were kind of feral. I mean, maybe they still harken
That
back to
makes
that
sense to me.
that history a little bit. And then just also that they were sort of guardians for the home. They would let you know if somebody's walking up to the door.
Also makes sense to me.
But, to be perfectly honest, there is not necessarily a definitive historic record of where they first came from. Like, we'll see them in, their likeness in some cave paintings and stuff like that. So I think the Chihuahuas have been around for a long time. We like to say they came from Mexico. I'm not positive we really know that.
Oh, interesting.
Just kind of more or less. And actually, it's interesting, since people started doing the DNA testing, where you kind of are starting to see like the actual genetic lineage. I think that they actually did find that there was one family of Chihuahuas that did trace back to foxes versus wolves. And so
gosh.
They have found that there was one strain of Chihuahuas that did not actually go back to the dogs. So again, I've not seen all of the research on it, but that, that's interesting, kind of.
That's
when you think
fascinating.
Yeah. So there's a lot of mystery about the Chihuahua.
I love that. Okay. I'd heard a lot of that, but the fox piece, I had not heard.
Yeah, I'll have to find it and send it to you later.
Yeah,
but,
if you can, that'd be great. I'll put the link in the show notes. That's
yeah,
really
for sure.
cool. That's really cool.
Trupanion is revolutionizing medical insurance for pets by providing the best possible experience to our members. And it's not some space-age dream. It's happening now. We pay your veterinarian directly while you're checking out, and we're the only ones who can, which means you have decisions in seconds, and you don't have to wait for reimbursement. So unlike with other providers, you'll keep more money in your pocket. Ask your veterinarian if Trupanion can pay them directly, because there's pet insurance, and then there's Trupanion.
I'm Laura Reeves, the host of Pure Dog Talk, and I'm coming today to talk to you about Brilliant Pad. And it is amazing and an incredible way for me to do my potty training with the puppies and not ever have to touch any yucky stuff. Brilliant Pad literally rolls the mess up and you never touch it. So I really wanted to talk to you guys about that, share with you the experience I had with it. It's like the most amazing thing you've ever seen. Okay, so we talked a little bit about health. What are some of the things that you are testing for? Some of the things that you're trying to either stay away from or avoid or eradicate, or what are you working on in the Chihuahua right now?
So I think a constant battle is always patellas. You know, you've got this tiny little joint. You've got this dog that you wouldn't let a Great Dane jump off the roof of your house, but every time a Chihuahua jumps off of the couch, that's essentially what they're doing. This dog size ratio to jump, it's about equivalent. And try telling them that they shouldn't do that. They're going to do that, whether you tell them they should do it or not. If they have access to a couch, they're jumping on it. They're running along the back of it. They are dogs that really, you can't convince them that they're too small to do something. So, you know, patellas, those little itty bitty tiny joints, it's a constant thing. It took a long time for me breeding wise to get to where I saw a much lower rate of it. Just being very vigilant in what I bred. Additionally, you know, we see a lot of heart issues in the breed, and
Really?
yeah, it's very, very common.
I didn't know that.
It has become more and more common, unfortunately. So that is where it really is important to see, you know, that a breeder isn't just checking a dog once when they're a year old, but try to find a breeder where you can see results for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old dogs that are still heart clear. Because especially over the last 15, 20 years, it's become a lot more of an issue. You know, so heart issues are definitely becoming more prominent, unfortunately. I would say dental issues are a huge one.
I was going to say teeth.
Teeth, you've got this tiny itty bitty little mouth. They don't tend to shed their baby teeth effectively. So if you don't have a family veterinarian that knows to watch for that and say maybe get those baby teeth out when they're spayed or neutered, you can actually set the dog up for a lot more dental issues than they maybe would have had. So just kind of being aware of retained puppy teeth, and then keeping the teeth clean as the dog ages, because clean teeth, again, will contribute to those heart issues.
Right. Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, you know, our old Chihuahua that has now, you know, like 4 teeth left in her head. Brushing little teeny tiny Chihuahua teeth. What's your best tip for keeping those little mouths clean?
So I do find that using like a dental spray is actually very, very helpful. Which I can send you a link to the one that I recommend.
Yeah,
there's no, and they just changed the name of it. So I'm not going to say what the name is because it just changed. It used to be Pet's Life. But I can't remember the new name. But that one actually is really, really good. Brushing teeth. Use an itty bitty little infant toothbrush. They're soft, they're small. The bristles are actually a little bit shorter than the smallest dog toothbrush you can find. I try to make sure that my puppies are familiarized with having their mouths handled and touched, and that kind of sets the groundwork. And then just as your puppy ages, starting to introduce them to the toothbrush. Let them lick chicken flavored toothpaste off of it. Put it in their mouth. You know, I have found that adding water to their kibble, if you feed kibble, makes a remarkable difference in the amount of tartar buildup that you get. So maybe because they're not really actually chewing it as well, but they tend to, you know, need a lot fewer dental. I mean, you know what? Their teeth are healthier for a longer period of time, and they're getting hydrated at the same time. Is better for their organs. So, hey, it's a win-win.
Love it.
But just familiarizing them with it young. I really like the CET toothpaste. Yep. I've used that for a long time. I've had really good success with it. They also have little dental finger wipes, which are great. And you know, if you brush, those are awesome because you can kind of put it on your finger and sort of get back in there. And it's got some enzymes on most of them that help with the plaque buildup. So I think the more dental care you can give, the better, because teeth are definitely an issue, and they will affect all of the dog. They'll affect all their organ systems over time if you don't take care of them.
Yep, 100%. And talk to us a little bit about, I'm laughing, training. Because Chihuahuas are not, I mean, you said early on, you get out what you put in, which is true of all dogs, but
Yeah.
there might be some unique challenges here. So let's talk about that a little bit.
It depends on what you're asking of them. I think probably honestly the biggest challenge training wise is potty training with Chihuahuas. And, for the most part, they can be completely potty trained successfully if you as the owner do your part too. And that means being consistent when they're young, not setting them up to fail. Don't give them too much space in your home until you trust them. Don't, let them run the entire house when they're a 4-month-old puppy, because they're probably going to poop behind the couch and you're going to find it 3 months later. And now that's a habit that you're going to battle for the entire life of the dog. So watch your puppies and be vigilant in the method that you want to train them to, whether it's litter, a potty pad, outdoors, and they really can be 100% trained. Even the males, people say, oh, they mark. I've successfully trained intact males that breed females, and they can be house trained. It's just a matter of sticking with it and making sure that it's something that you don't give up on until they really get it. You see the light bulb click on, and then it's going forward. They're great. As far as training, I think Chihuahuas are actually great little trick dogs. I've had quite a few of my puppy owners get the trick dog titles on their dogs. I think that they're very intelligent, but they're also very strong-willed. I don't think that recall is ever going to be something I personally trust my Chihuahuas with. Even the ones that are really good, they just, they have other ideas about what they should be doing. And so as far as a situation where you would need recall for their safety, I always tell people it's not a thing. Even if you think you got it, you don't. And so recall is a challenge, I would say. And you need to be really careful where you do trust a Chihuahua off leash. And even if you trust your dog, it's the environment that you maybe shouldn't trust, because there's a lot of things that are dangerous when you're 5 pounds.
Hawks,
that are out of
owls,
control.
Big dogs, cats.
Dogs, kids, kids don't necessarily understand how to handle or treat a small dog. So, but they can definitely be taught commands and be really very reliable. But I wouldn't say you're going to get a Schutzen level of training in a Chihuahua.
I was going to say, I don't see a lot of Och Chihuahuas, is what I'm saying.
It's not a realistic expectation, but they also definitely very much can be trained, should be trained. One of the commands that I start teaching puppies very young is quiet, because Chihuahuas like to bark. And they really, for the most part, I think, pick up on that. They learn that. They know that. There are some of them that'll be like, they'll look right at you. They'll be quiet for a second. They'll be like, but, they keep going. But, I think teaching them quiet is important, especially because, it depends on the line. It depends on the family of dogs, but having them understand that there's a point in time where you stop, or I heard you, I get it, that there's a man outside the door, is so important to having an enjoyable pet to live with.
And ours, it's not so much, warning. We've got big dogs for that. It's complaining. This isn't right. My bed isn't right. My food isn't right. I'm not in your lap. I'm outside. I'm inside. I don't want to be where that is her. And she will just go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Forever.
It's like, I'll put him outside at night. It's like, okay, go potty before bed. And, my oldest one will just stand there and bark at the door. She's like, no, it's bedtime. We're not going to do this. We're going to come inside. And she lets me know that's, and then I've got, 1 or 2 that when I'm eating, they think that they should bark at me to feed them.
Yes. We've got that too.
How is this tiny little creature dictating, that I'm going to give it a piece of my food?
Yes. Dictating, it's 5 a.m., get up. I'm like, wait, no, really?
Yeah. Well, and it is funny because, as far as training goes, like the very first thing you do in the morning with a Chihuahua is you take it outside or wherever it's supposed to go potty. Because if you don't, it's going to go on the floor. Like there's
100%.
100%. It's that, like, you don't brush your teeth. You don't get to pee. That Chihuahua owns the first minutes after you open your eyes. That just is life with a Chihuahua.
Yeah, 100%. Well, they kind of own you. I'm pretty sure that's their opinion. I own you and you are here to serve me. So chop, chop.
It definitely is part of it.
You made a comment earlier that I wanted to go back to. You said that in your experience, children have a hard time interacting with the breed and understanding how fragile they are. So talk to me about, I'm an owner or a prospective owner and I have a family. How do you approach people about having Chihuahuas in the home with children?
So I have never denied, a home based on them having children. I sort of want to see that they have, an idea of how to sort of monitor those interactions. You want to make sure that, a young child really isn't left alone with a puppy because they don't have the motor skill coordination, especially up to, 3-4 years of age, where they can necessarily say, hold on to a tiny little puppy.
It's wiggling and squirming and yeah.
So just kind of talking with the parents and seeing what their approach is going to be to those interactions between puppy and child. And, kids honestly can do great with Chihuahuas. I just placed a Chihuahua this past week where they have a 2.5-year-old and a 5-year-old. And it was funny because the dad used to show dogs. And so I knew that he would monitor it all and make sure that it went well. And, I've gotten all these pictures, the little puppy's asleep with the kids are watching TV. And, the cool thing is those kids get to grow up with that dog. They get to have that dog probably through their entire childhood, through college. And so I don't think that that's a thing that can't happen. It's just making sure that it's managed to where the puppy has a safe place to be when you can't watch the kids and the puppy. Yeah. Whether that's a pen or a crate in another room or, whatever you decide. And then just monitoring the interactions. Kids that don't have context of how to handle a little dog really can be tough for them because they're screechy, they're erratic, they're, they aren't necessarily aware of how easy this cute little fluffy thing can break. Yeah. And a lot of them kind of have like that cute aggression. Like they see it and they're just like, I just want to, squeeze it. And
just want to squeeze it and pet it and call it George.
Yeah. And so, kids that I don't know, when they're interacting with the dogs, I'm very careful because it's sort of, especially the little long coat puppies, like they see them and they're just like, it's the cutest little thing and they don't, but it's not to say that kids and Chihuahuas don't mix because I've had a lot of really great success stories with kids and Chihuahuas. And it really has not been an issue.
Okay. Good to know. And so I've followed you. I know how hard it is to get Chihuahua puppies, to raise Chihuahua puppies, to have Chihuahua puppies to place into pet homes. Never mind show homes. So talk us a little bit through that, through just the sheer brutal nature of breeding dogs that are born weighing 2 ounces. Like they're the size of mice. So walk us through this.
Yeah, as I mentioned last night, I'm getting ready to go to bed and I have a week-old litter and like one of the puppies was kind of trying to crash on me. And so I didn't get to go to bed. I got to spend a couple hours making sure that she got stabilized and she's doing great. And luckily that wasn't a complicated thing, but you start out with a lot of C-sections just to begin with, which have gotten astronomically more expensive over the last decade. I started out, I think I was paying $750 for a C-section, which was still kind of high end from what I heard some other people were paying. And now it's really standard. It's, $3,000 to $6,000 easy. So you're doing this C-section on probably 50 to 70% of your litters. If you're breeding show quality Chihuahuas, it's a very high number. because you have this tiny little dog, it's got a shorter back and a shorter body. You've got this big round head, and the math just doesn't math. They're not free whelping as well as they did when people were breeding a little bit plainer head style and a little bit longer body. So, you've got a lot of C-sections. You start out with that, and then, you've got this initial week of not enough milk. Mom doesn't necessarily know what she's supposed to do. Puppies are very fragile. You've got to live in a sauna because they can't be cold. And that's kind of miserable for you as the human, because it's got to be warmer than what's comfortable, at least for me. And so you get through the first week of life, and that's the first 2 weeks, I would say, are kind of hold your breath. I check on litters until they're about 2 weeks old. If they're doing well, I check on them once during the night. And if they're not doing well, you can be up every 2 hours. Yeah. So you get through the first 2 weeks, and then you've got kind of the calm before the storm. You've got, maybe I would say about 2 weeks where like mom knows what she's doing. Mom's keeping them clean. She's got enough milk. The puppies are sort of just these cute little beans that just sleep there. And then, around 4 weeks, you'll kind of see the first one, and it's like you put mom's food down and you'll find one of them, and they just have dove into the food bowl. Right. And then, you start the process of weaning, which I'm very lucky to have puppies that wean well. It's pretty effortless. And part of that may just be, the food that I feed. Part of it may be that I've selected, against puppies that are hard to wean. I, don't have puppies that sugar crash for the most part, which is huge.
Talk about that, because I think I've had Marty talk about the hypoglycemia and some of that, but I think that's something that a lot of folks who, if they're not from toy breeds, don't understand the danger of hypoglycemia in toy breed puppies.
So essentially, until a puppy has reached about 2 pounds, the glycogen store in their liver is not very good, for lack of a better word. And if that gets depleted, when a puppy sugar crashes, you sort of have started a cycle that can be ongoing, because even though you can stabilize the sugar in that moment, you now have a liver that's missing something that's essential to preventing it from happening again. And so until about 2 pounds, I that's kind of the marker for me of a puppy can't leave before it's 2 pounds, because generally after 2 pounds, the body isn't going to sugar crash as long as you have a healthy puppy. But up until that 2 pound mark, you have a puppy where you've got to watch for it if it's not eating, if it becomes kind of listless or overly sleepy, if its gums are pale, if it is sort of wobbly while it's playing. Those are probably the biggest things that you would watch for. But if you see any of those things, or you kind of see the weight gain stagnate. So, if you've got a little bitty puppy that a breeder will let you have before it's 2 pounds, like you need to actually be weighing that puppy at least every couple of days. And if you don't see a steady gain on that puppy, that's a sign that you may kind of be heading down that path. So just monitoring their weight, monitoring their behavior, making sure that you don't see any of those signs. If you let your puppy out and that puppy plays for 15, 20, 30 minutes, you can't let that puppy go to sleep. That puppy needs to eat. Needs to eat before it goes to sleep, because that's kind of where you'll sort of go down that path of a sugar crash. And, maybe part of why I don't see puppies sugar crash is that I have just such a good system of, I'm like, okay, the puppies come out, the puppies play. When the
puppies go to bed.
that's and so there's never that opportunity for their bodies to get low. Whereas I think it's really easy. You have this cute little puppy, you let it play probably longer than it should. Mm-hmm. You think, oh, it's going to go eat the food out of the dry bowl, but you put that puppy back in its pen and it just goes to sleep, and then it crashes. So up until about that 2 pound mark, just because of the way that they are so tiny and their body hasn't really sort of stabilized per se, you are at risk for that. And it is something to watch for with any toy breed.
Yeah. Well, and Chihuahuas also have, not all of them, but I think pretty commonly an open fontanel, right?
Yeah.
So head injury is a huge issue.
So it's actually interesting that you bring that up. So the open fontanelle does put them at a slightly increased risk of a head injury, but they were at risk for that head injury in the first place because it's this tiny little dog. You think about their height.
Sure.
They're the perfect height to bonk it on the top of, the bottom of a nightstand or a coffee table or whatever. They're sort of prone to hitting their heads. And I actually think that I firsthand have seen where that open fontanelle has actually saved puppies' lives.
Oh,
because when they've had that head trauma, it actually gave somewhere for the swelling to go. Whereas if you had a completely closed skull and you had that trauma, the swelling can only compress the brain. So there have actually been puppies that have lived because they had that open fontanelle.
Interesting.
Where you do have to be careful is some of them really will have a fairly large one, and then it would be, and it's not a concern. Like if a breeder says, well, the puppy has a large open fontanelle, it's something to be aware of. But as that puppy ages and grows, they all close quite a bit. Probably I would say a standard size in an adult dog is probably about as big around as a chapstick cap.
Yeah.
For lack of
like a thumb size. Yeah.
Thumb is maybe a little bit, and everybody's thumbs are different size, so I just have a chapstick cap. Everybody knows what size that is. So I think that though that's not a bad thing if they have that. And it's, we kind of have seen over in Europe, they've actually said no more open fontanelles.
Yeah, right.
They're actually kind of seeing some health issues come up that we weren't seeing.
Interesting.
And so again, there's, maybe there was something that nature designed the dog that way for a reason. And so it's not a concern. There are definitely a lot of veterinarians that still aren't familiar with it.
Right. Sure.
My parents brought their 14-year-old male Chihuahua to the vet. It's a new vet. And my mom calls me after and she says, well, the vet says that Hero has hydrocephalus because he has an open fontanelle. And they're going, dude, the dog is 14 years old. He's perfectly healthy. His lab work was perfect. He doesn't have a heart murmur. Dog is running around, wagging, happy. Like, do you really think that this animal has hydrocephalus? Like, because it has this. So a lot of veterinarians still think that it means that the dog has hydrocephalus, and it absolutely doesn't. And a large one on a puppy doesn't indicate that either.
Right.
It's one of those things where it is what it is. It's not bad. Right. It's not good.
It's just a thing in the breed that people need to know. Like people don't necessarily know that,
Yeah. So it's a good question and a good thing for people to be aware of.
Okay. Final closeout question, grooming. I mean, there's not that much grooming on these little creatures. My squirrel on crack, I dunked it in the sink. We're good to go.
The grooming really is pretty easy in Chihuahuas. Wash them. They can air dry. Even the long coats, I would say, unless you have a really profuse coat, long coats you probably want to brush at least once a week. Make sure you don't get any matting. Yeah. But they're not heavy maintenance. They're the depending on the type of coat that you have, the biggest grooming thing is shedding. So, if you've got a thicker coated smooth, that's probably where you're going to see the most shedding. And, more frequent baths. The Kong does like a little rubber brush that if you kind of use that when you're bathing the dog, it will get a lot of that dead hair out. But you can do really honestly as little as you want. And I mean, they can go months without a bath and still be clean.
Fit in the sink. I'm just saying.
Wash them right in the sink. I think the biggest grooming concern with Chihuahuas is their toenails.
Yes.
One of the things when you've got a young puppy, get them used to having their toenails done, because when you let those toenails get too long, it then affects their foot, it affects their pastern, it goes right up, it goes through all of their structure. It affects the way that dog handles life on a day-to-day basis. And again, if your pet's comfortable, they're going to be a better companion. Keep their nails short. That's the biggest grooming thing with Chihuahuas is their toenails. The rest of it, easy.
100%. All right. Well, I could just sit and talk Chihuahuas with you forever, but it is a life and we have to move on. So, Kristi, I really appreciate it. It's great to talk to you. You are such a wealth of knowledge, And I really appreciate getting to share that with my audience. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.